front office of the Hawks has the green light from ownership to consider any and all trade possibilities moving on from Trae Young. The front office made a phone call to Trae Young. They were unsure if they should do so initially. Spoke to Trae about that, and he said he's focused on tonight's game. He's here to play basketball.
I want to make something abundantly clear. This isn't something that is necessarily written in stone. It's not like the Atlanta Hawks came out and said, "You're definitely trading Trae Young no matter what." But there is a story that we've been covering for the past year and a half. There is consistency in this story, and that's a huge sign of something that could potentially come that is going to shock everyone. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Today's video is sponsored by Ridge, which has made my life significantly easier. First comes the Ridge wallet, which could hold up to 12 cards and has room for cash. There's a reason why this bad boy has over 50,000 5-star reviews. The durable material means that each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty, and it's significantly more convenient than traveling everywhere with a gigantic bulky wallet that will leave you prone to theft and gold diggers. It also has RFID blocking technology to make sure that digital pickpocketers can't steal your info. But even more so, I absolutely love the Ridge key case. Primarily because now I can just take each key out one at a time and just unlock the door as needed instead of carrying a big bulky set of jingly keys everywhere. Especially because that would also scratch my phone. I was just not a fan of it. Even more so, this key case serves as a grip. So if you ever have a difficult door to open, you can just hold this grip and that way it doesn't hurt your hand as much. And right now they're hooking up my subscribers fat. When you go to ridge.com/flight and use my promo code FLIGHT, you'll get 10% off of all your purchases. That's ridge.com/flight and promo code FLIGHT for 10% off. And thank you, Ridge, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? The Atlanta Hawks underwent one of the quickest rebuilds that I think I have ever had the pleasure of seeing. For those of you that forgot, the 2014 to 2015 Atlanta Hawks finished with a 60-22 season. They did this by replicating a similar brand of offense as the Tim Duncan era San Antonio Spurs did, which makes a lot of sense because their head coach, Mike Budenholzer, came from the Greg Popovich coaching tree. They were able to finish first in the Eastern Conference, but unfortunately for them, they were in the Eastern Conference playoffs during the 2010s, where LeBron James quite literally had ownership of the Eastern Conference playoffs during that era. The year after, they'll finish in 4th place, and the year after that, they'd finish in 5th place before they finally decided in the 2017 to 2018 season, it was time for a full-fledged rebuild. Now, what's important to note here is Travis Schlenk, their old general manager, came aboard during the 2017 to 2018 season. And that 2018 offseason is when the Atlanta Hawks began making moves, primarily in the offseason by trading the draft rights to Luka Doncic for Trae Young, which is kind of ironic here because both of those human beings are currently finding themselves in trade rumors, and both of them kind of make sense. There are times where you will see the media just pulling trade rumors out of their ass just because there's nothing to talk about, but in this particular case there's plenty to talk about, and this is one of those things that are worth talking about. The thing that was interesting about the Trae Young led Atlanta Hawks is following his rookie season during the 2020 to 2021 season, the Atlanta Hawks would put together a very promising team around Trae Young. I mean, they were able to acquire Lou Williams, John Collins seemed to be a stud, they were able to acquire Bogdan Bogdanovic, they traded for Clint Capella, they had Danilo Gallinari, Kevin Huerter, which to this day I can't say his name properly, so roast me in the comment section if you may. And they also traded up for DeAndre Hunter. They had so much depth on the team that Cam Reddish couldn't get any playing time on this team whatsoever. Their playoff run was absolutely magnificent. I mean, in the first round, you saw them going up against the New York Knicks. This was the first time the New York Knicks made it back to the playoffs in quite some time. The crowd really got into it, if you guys remember it. If you forgot, watch.
So they're psyched to be back in the postseason. An obscene anti-Trae Young chant erupts.
They would then go into the Eastern Conference semifinals, where Trae Young would grow his villain arc by completely shattering Ben Simmons' confidence. I mean, I think Ben Simmons may have done it to himself, but the Atlanta Hawks would beat the Philadelphia 76ers. Ben Simmons' career would go down the toilet as a result of this, which we made a full video on if you guys are interested in catching that. And then they would lose to the eventual NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals. Following this, there was a lot of promise around the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, this was one hell of a rebuild, and they did it very, very quickly. I mean, I could only imagine Sacramento Kings fans seething at how quickly they were able to rebuild this team. But then that offseason, the owner of the Atlanta Hawks, Tony Ressler, said something that caused us to raise some eyebrows in regards to their ability to bring back everyone on this team, saying that it's complicated, of course, because we are trying to convince people that we're building something, but let's not kid ourselves. Our job is to run a good business. What we're trying to achieve is literally keeping our best players, as you could imagine, trying to make clear that we're going to have to spend a lot more than we have this season. We fully expect that. I'm not sure we're going to be able to keep every single player that we want to keep. Pretty good bet, pretty good assumption we will not, but I do think we have several years that we should be able to build some real stability. If the question is, are we scared of the tax? Are we scared of going into the tax? I'm scared of paying the tax and not being a good team. Yes, that I'm scared of. But if we have to go into the tax to be a great team for a period of time, so be it. Bear in mind, throughout this period of time, a lot of changes were happening for the Atlanta Hawks. A lot of positive changes. I mean, clearly firing Lloyd Pierce, who Trae Young didn't get along with during the 2020 to 2021 season, promoting Nate McMillan to head coach resulted in some fantastic results. The Atlanta Hawks made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. They rebuilt relatively quickly. So the clear move from here on out was extending Nate McMillan and trying to improve the roster for the 2021 to 2022 season. Now, how they would improve the roster would be a different conversation, because following season, they didn't necessarily have the same luck. As a matter of fact, in the following season, the Atlanta Hawks would finish 9th in the Eastern Conference during the 2021 to 2022 season. Their offensive efficiency was still up there. As a matter of fact, it was better than the 2020 to 2021 season. The defensive rating was significantly worse, however, and their net rating was marginally worse. Regardless, the Atlanta Hawks would lose in the first round to the Miami Heat 4-1. And that offseason, it was clear that some changes needed to be made. What changes, do you ask? Well, it seemed like the Atlanta Hawks were making good on their promise. They couldn't keep everyone, and, well, as a result, they had some big decisions to make. And from these decisions, you would see the beginning of some instability in the front office, primarily in the form of the man that was in charge of rebuilding this roster to begin with, Travis Schlenk. We would find out in January of 2013 that Travis Schlenk would actually step down, and we would find out the reason he stepped down is because of what would go down during the 2022 offseason. Now, bear in mind, the Hawks have a ton of talent, but at this point, they were anything but stable. John Collins was in trade rumors each and every single season over the past 3 seasons, and the Atlanta Hawks clearly needed to do something in order to go back from the 9th seed to potentially the 5th seed and try to re-emerge as one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. So, what would they end up doing? Well, they decided to trade for DeJounte Murray. And this is where things would go south for the Atlanta Hawks, because the Atlanta Hawks would trade Danilo Gallinari, 3 first-round picks, a 2026 pick swap to the Sacramento Kings for DeJounte Murray and Jacques Landale. So at the time, I actually praised this trade, I'll admit, primarily because I wasn't aware of the contract that DeJounte Murray had. I thought DeJounte Murray was under contract for a significant amount of time. He has a very good contract, by the way. Then I realized DeJounte Murray only has 1 more season under contract in addition to the current season that we're in. So following the end of next season, the 2023 to 2024 season, DeJounte Murray is a free agent. And this was a huge point of contention between the Atlanta Hawks front office. Travis Schlenk was against this, but Nick Ressler, the 27-year-old son of Hawks owner Tony Ressler, disagreed. And this was the reason why the Atlanta Hawks made the DeJounte Murray trade. Now, I want you to understand, as a result of the DeJounte Murray trade, the Atlanta Hawks actually had to trade Kevin Huerter as well because they needed to get under the luxury tax, which clearly the ownership of the Atlanta Hawks wasn't willing to pay based upon what we heard from the owner of the Atlanta Hawks just a few moments prior. It was definitely a gamble. It was definitely a slight overpay. It's not even close to the overpay that the Rudy Gobert trade was going to be. And at the very minimum, their 2023 first-round pick was protected. So if things don't necessarily go well, then at the very minimum, at least the Atlanta Hawks would have their first first-round pick in 2023. Now, I want to be clear, it's not that DeJounte Murray was bad. As a matter of fact, statistically speaking, he was more or less the same player, at least on paper, as he was with the San Antonio Spurs. Now, his advanced analytics might indicate otherwise because offensively, his OBPM was a 1.1. Defensively, he was a 0 for defensive box plus minus, but that's kind of more dependent on the way your entire team is playing. His PER took a dip from 22.3 to 17, but that's still his second best of his career. So at this point, you might be shrugging if you're the Atlanta Hawks. Where did it go wrong? What are we doing wrong? Their starting five looks pretty solid. They have a nice mix of veteran presence and youth. So why is there so many problems going on? I mean, in the middle of the season, there definitely was some drama, primarily between Trae Young and Nate McMillan. If you remember, Nate McMillan and Trae Young had a miscommunication about Trae Young playing in a game that he inevitably would not participate in. Trae Young gave us this gem of a response to as a result of it.
Private matter again, and it made public, which was unfortunate.
You are a leader of this team, and when you're not there to support your guys.
When you're an outside guy like you are,
please, I mean,
a private matter needs to stay private.
Nate McMillan would threaten to step down, and then eventually he would actually step down because of how difficult it was for him to coach the Atlanta Hawks. And of course, the Hawks would end up hiring Quinn Snyder in the middle of the season. But Quinn Snyder runs one of the most complex offenses in the entire NBA. I mean, at least he did with the Utah Jazz. He can't come in and just teach his offense on the fly in the middle of the season. So clearly, the Hawks are going to take a step back. And unfortunately, it seems like the Hawks are going to be even more of a dumpster fire, because originally we got a report from Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer that stated that the Hawks might consider trading Trae Young. The article is called "The Hawks Have Changed Everything Except Trae Young." To be honest, the headline makes a lot of sense. They have changed everything but Trae Young. They've tried putting depth around Trae Young. They've tried to put young talent around Trae Young. They got him an ideal pick and roll center in Clint Capella. They got him a two-way backcourt running mate in DeJounte Murray. And now they got him a top-tier head coach in Quinn Snyder. This is his third head coach in 5 years. At a particular point, they might be wondering if Trae Young is the problem. Now, on top of this, you had Shams Charania say this later on.
But I'm told the Hawks are continuing to closely monitor Trae Young's day-to-day commitments. Question marks, I think, around that organization as far as Trae Young. Will be conversations I think between Trae Young's camp and the Hawks and their ownership as far as what direction the Hawks are going into the future.
So the Atlanta Hawks have question marks on Trae Young, and they could discuss his future with Rich Paul at the end of the season. Now, Trae Young responded to this report, stating that nobody within the Hawks has told him that he could be traded, but stuff like that comes out all the time. It could be false, it could be true, you never know. Young would then get asked if the Hawks play-in games felt bigger as they can determine his fate with the franchise. He would continue to say, especially as the player in the moment, you can't look at what's going to come on next year. After the game, if the game doesn't go your way tonight, what's going to happen? Like, you can't focus on things like that. That messes up your head, and then you're not ready to play. So me, I'm not worried about that. I'm going to let my game play. After the season, whatever happens, happens. I mean, I'm focused on the next task at hand. I can't worry about the outside noise or whatever fake stories come out or what's true, whatever. This brings us to a question: should the Atlanta Hawks trade Trae Young? In my opinion, no, I don't think they should. Do I think he's going to get traded in the offseason? Most definitely not. I mean, you have yet to see whether or not Trae Young can work under a Quinn Snyder offense. He has shown you flashes of being a star in the NBA. There's no question in my mind that Trae Young could one day be a top 5 player in the NBA. There's no question whatsoever. It's about putting him in a situation to succeed, to become that player. Obviously, Trae Young has had a lot of comparisons to Steph Curry coming out of college. And no, I'm not calling him Steph Curry, but perhaps the Atlanta Hawks might want to consider building a similar type of team around Trae Young as the Golden State Warriors did around Steph Curry. Or maybe they perceive Trae Young to be more of a James Harden type of player. Maybe they would want him to isolate more. Well, they've tried that in the past and it didn't work out. So now it's up to Quinn Snyder to really try to figure out how to use Trae Young in this particular instance. And I feel like if they are going to want to trade him, they should at least give him one more season to truly figure out if they can make it work with Trae Young as their franchise cornerstone. I want you to remember as well, it's not like Trae Young can leave in free agency. He just signed a Supermax contract. He is under contract until the end of the 2026 to 2027 season. He's not going anywhere. I mean, he's here for at least the next 4 years if he wants to be here against his will. Could it be to the Atlanta Hawks' benefit to trade Trae Young? Well, I'm not necessarily sure, because you're already very invested in this core. You gave up a lot of assets to get DeJounte Murray on your team to begin with. It's not like tanking is going to result in you having a ton of draft capital in the future to build a brand new young team. At the end of the day, what do I think is going to happen? Well, I think Trae Young is going to be a member of the Atlanta Hawks for at least another 2 seasons, and if it doesn't work out, then it may be worth exploring. But I also think this is an explosive situation because Trae Young is one of the more outspoken stars in the NBA. I mean, of course, you saw multiple instances of him having very volatile interviews with the media, so let me know in the comment section down below. Should the Atlanta Hawks trade Trae Young? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.